Smarties, Black Magic, Jelly Tots, Kit Kats, chocolate oranges, Rolos and Polos. All of these wonderful nostalgic treats are from York, a city with a very long and distinguished confectionery history.
York was quite an important place from early times. It was a social centre, an ecclesiastical centre, it was a centre of law and all sorts of administrative things, and that meant that you had people who were willing to pay for luxury foods and things like sugar. They would definitely have been imported, probably by water up the river from Hull. And by the 18th century, we know we had at least one confectioner in York because he wrote a book. He's called John Emmett, and his choice collection of excellent receipts in confectionery, printed by Alex Staples in Coney Street in 1737, and it took until the mid-19th century when Terry's had become a much bigger company and Rowntree's started to produce cocoa, that for the chocolate, the emphasis on chocolate, really to become part of York's heritage.
I'm sat in St Helens Square outside Terry's old chocolate shop and tea rooms. Terry's, alongside Rowntree and Craven, put York on the map as the confectionery capital. All established in the 19th century, they employed 17,000 local people and brought great prosperity to the city. Today, confectionery still has its place in York, and in 2012, York's Chocolate Story opened to celebrate this heritage.
A lot of people don't realise how some of the world's most famous chocolate and confectionery came from York. The Kit Kats, Aeros, Polos, After Eight, Smarties, the families that founded Cadbury's and Fry's came to York and worked for Rowntree's to study the business. So Dairy Milk, we taught them that. So that's why we like to think of York as the capital of chocolate, and the history stretches back well over 300 years. Well, last year we celebrated the 150th anniversary the founding of Rowntree's. They were founded in 1862. That's when Henry Isaac Rowntree bought the Tuke cocoa business. And Henry Isaac Rowntree worked for the Tukes. He studied the business and then took it over completely. And he started off making some rudimentary chocolate bars, but the business really didn't take off until his brother Joseph arrived a few years later. He brought across some French confectioneers from the continent and released their now extremely famous and still very popular fruit pastilles.
Rowntree's is arguably the longest surviving household name today. Their famous fruit pastels have been enjoyed for over 100 years. But who is the man behind the Rowntree's confectionery empire? His name is Joseph Rowntree, and he's remembered today for far more than these humble pastels. Many of York's institutions bear his name, and there's currently a Facebook campaign to have his statue put in Parliament Square. And just last year, Joseph won a special York Community Pride Award, which acknowledged all he'd done for the city. We will explore what all the fuss is about and why he's still remembered today. After the success of the fruit pastels, Joseph moved the business from Tanner's Moat in the crowded city centre to a huge new factory north of the city. By the turn of the century, Joseph was a very wealthy man, and Rowntree's became a household name in Britain. Along the way, the Rowntree's company has contributed to modern branding and marketing concepts, with colourful advertising that captivated consumers in the 20th century. But Joseph was not simply content to enjoy the fruits of his labour. By the time he went into the confectionery industry, Britain had witnessed a brutal industrial revolution that was cruel to the working class masses, and the country was still suffering with a severe hangover. Serious overcrowding in the Victorian cities and labour exploitation forced many citizens to live in slums and struggle to make ends meet. Poverty was rife. As his workforce grew, Joseph was determined his employees be treated fairly and have the opportunity to better themselves. To him, happy workers just made good business sense. He gave them 8-hour working days, pensions, sick benefits and access to a doctor and dentist. This is well before the age of the welfare state and modern workers' rights. Perhaps due to his Quaker faith, he felt a strong sense of obligation, not only to his workers, but to the general community, a feeling which was unfamiliar at the time to many businessmen. For the wider community, Joseph Rowntree established a school for adults to improve the literacy of the area, and founded the city library here behind me. Not only did Joseph promote better working conditions within his factories, he built an entire village for his workers called New Earswick. This came out of the Garden City movement of the 1900s and promoted respectable housing at affordable rates, surrounded by nature. Every single house had a fruit tree in its garden. There already existed a long tradition of giving to the needy, but often failed to acknowledge the root causes of poverty. As Joseph said, the soup kitchen in York never has difficulty in obtaining adequate financial funding, but inquiry into the extent and causes of poverty would enlist little support. As Joseph's son Sebon became more involved in the family business, he also became committed to battling poverty. With Joseph's guidance, he conducted an extensive social survey of York. His team of investigators knocked on 11,000 family homes, gathering data about their living conditions. These findings were published in his influential book, Poverty, A Study of Town Life. Joseph understood the broader economic causes of poverty and the damaging consequences of low wages. An increasing number of social innovators, like Joseph, were challenging the conservative belief that the poor were responsible for their own destitution. In 1904, with longevity in mind, Joseph Rowntree set up 4 trusts which still bear his name today: the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the Charitable Trust, the Housing Trust and the Reform Trust.
Today, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and the Joseph Rowntree Housing Trust together share a purpose, which has its roots in that famous memorandum. We search, finding out the reasons why, developing a world-class research programme to understand and propose solutions. We demonstrate different ways of tackling difficult and entrenched problems. And we influence, working with those who have power to make sure that the voice, the needs and the demands of those who have been dispossessed can be heard at the highest levels. In ringing tones, he commanded his trusts to search out the underlying causes of weakness or evil in the community, rather than remedying their more superficial manifestations. And with the optimism that so characterised the turn of the 20th century, he declared his hope that with goodwill and knowledge all problems could be solved. If the enormous volume of the philanthropy of the present day, he said, were wisely directed, it would, I believe, in the course of a few years change the face of England.
Joseph Rowntree died in 1925, aged 88, which was only 2 years after he had retired. By the time of his death, the village of New Earswick had grown from 28 to 400 homes. Following his funeral, over 2,000 people attended a separate memorial service, a true testament to the loyalty and support he'd garnered throughout the years. Even Rowntree's competitor Cadbury was compelled to send his personal condolences, not remarking on his fantastic business skills, but instead stating that he'll be greatly missed by those whom he has inspired, by his wise counsel and helped in so many ways. As we've seen, Joseph Rowntree left a great legacy, not only in confectionery, but most importantly in philanthropy.
And he's still going 150 years later.